It's scorching hot in Crimea again. Ukrainian drones are systematically destroying the occupiers' equipment on the temporarily occupied peninsula. In particular, a Russian Su-30 fighter jet came under attack. And in just a minute, we'll show you footage of the combat operation against it. Friends, this is the topic of the day on the YouTube channel Ukraine Today. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Today, we'll also talk about the high-profile elimination of a war criminal. It is now officially confirmed. In the Kursk region, the deputy commander of the Russian Navy, Mikhail Gudkov, was eliminated. By the way, his brigade was involved in the executions of Ukrainian armed forces soldiers. Things were also very loud, right, in Moscow itself. In the center of the Russian capital, a car carrying FSB veterans was blown up. Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is spreading fake news that Kyiv wouldn't last even 2 months without American weapons. What is this? Is it just more nonsense from Putin's propagandists, or is there some real objectivity to it? All the details are in the following report. Studio discussions.
Ukrainian beavers are destroying the occupiers' equipment in Crimea, and we're not talking about ordinary animals that the occupiers should be afraid of. These are all high-precision UAVs, and they are taking out expensive air defense systems in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. Footage from the main intelligence directorate shows the successful destruction of a Pantsir air defense system, 3 radar stations, and a Russian Su-30 fighter jet at the airfield in Saki. Meanwhile, the news from the US for Ukraine is not the best. American authorities have announced a suspension of arms deliveries to our country as they are concerned that the Pentagon's own stockpiles have been depleted too much. According to Western journalists, this means that the shipment of certain anti-aircraft missiles and other precision munitions to Kyiv will also be temporarily halted. At the same time, the US State Department states that the American decision does not mean a complete halt to deliveries.
There is already an official statement from the White House press secretary that the United States has not suspended all arms deliveries to Ukraine. And the decision made by the Pentagon the day before is just one situation. Moreover, at this point, the United States has unblocked the issue of re-exporting American weapons, that is, the supply of arms from NATO armies' stockpiles which had been transferred or accordingly sold to these countries by the United States for the needs of Ukraine's defense forces.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there was, and we are not afraid to use this word, the elimination of the year. During a strike by the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the chief of staff of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Ildar Akhmerov, was eliminated.
Since 2023, he held the position of deputy commander of the Black Sea Fleet, and since 2024, he was the chief of staff and first deputy commander of the Black Sea Fleet. His name is included in the so-called Book of Executioners of the Ukrainian People, which states that he has been directly involved in planning the main organization of the Russian invasion of Ukraine since the 24th of February 2022.
There has not yet been any official confirmation of his elimination from the main intelligence directorate, but Russian propaganda is already mourning, lamenting, and demanding a response from their so-called decision-making center. Dangerous things are happening right under Putin's nose in his own capital. Since the beginning of June, 3 cars have been rigged with explosives in Moscow. All the incidents took place in the western part of the city and close to each other. Experts who arrived at the scenes did not confirm the presence of explosive devices. However, 1 car carrying KGB veterans did end up exploding.
At the moment, it is being reported that there were supposedly technical malfunctions in the Nissan Qashqai, in which a veteran of the State Security Committee and his daughter, a former FSB officer, were present. Problems with the wiring were discovered, but this is the official version from the Russian side, which may be conducting information operations in this way to minimize the negative impact on the Russian security services. And we are talking about operations by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine directly on the territory of the occupying country. So if the involvement of Ukrainian intelligence services in the attempted murder is confirmed, and we can qualify this situation as such, this will once again demonstrate the low level of counterintelligence and counter-sabotage activities of the Russian special services.
Drones continue to attack Russia. In the past 3 months, the Energia plant in Yelets has been attacked for the 2nd time. The facility produces batteries, including for UAVs, as well as batteries for aviation and the Navy. At the same time, while strikes are hitting Russia, everyone is going off to fight in Ukraine. Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, reported that from January to July 2025, more than 210,000 people signed contracts with the Ministry of Defense to participate in the war against Ukraine. The current rate of recruitment into the army, which is carried out mainly in poor regions of Russia for generous payments from Putin's shoulder, is incommensurate with local salaries, and this currently allows us to cover frontline losses, which have already reached more than 1 million people for Russians.
Next, we speak with military expert Sergei Grabsky. Sergei, hello. Thank you for finding the time.
Welcome to the studio. Glad to see you.
Let's start with the possibility of the United States suspending military aid to Ukraine. How fatal would this be for us, after all, if it happens? Because even some members of parliament are already spreading panic. I'll give an example of the posts by a member of parliament. One of the posts saying that Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and industries, will be destroyed. This will be coercion to capitulate. This is what awaits Ukraine if we are not given at least air defense missiles.
Let's answer this question step by step. First, even American officials have confirmed that there is no complete halt in supplies. Moreover, additional options for supplying weapons and military equipment are currently being considered. Second, it should be understood that America will have to fulfill its contracted obligations, and there is no doubt about that. Third, is it possible that the level of supplies will decrease or even stop altogether after the contracted amount of weapons and military equipment has been delivered? Yes. In principle, it is possible after September. Will this lead to a sudden collapse of the front or of the air defense? No, it will not. As of today, we are saying that Europe has taken on about 30 to 60% of the supply of weapons, military equipment and ammunition. Ukraine provides 30%. Taking into account, well, let's say the relative unpredictability of the White House administration, as well as Europe, we are making certain efforts, serious efforts aimed at reducing this shortage of weapons and military equipment. The next thing to understand is that the entire stockpile of weapons and military equipment cannot run out all at once, because there is such a concept as echelonning, that is the distribution of resources, the allocation of ammunition volumes across different levels. In other words, we gain some additional time. I'm talking about the worst case scenario here, the worst one, which makes up about 10 to 15% probability. This gives us the opportunity to continue increasing, so to speak, our own stockpiles of weapons, and to expect similar increases from our allies. And now the next question. Even if we are talking about air defense missiles, as of today, we know that anti-ballistic missiles, the ones used by the Patriot system, are mainly the ones we use. The question is, how many ballistic missiles does the enemy actually launch at sea? A relatively small number, about 2 or 3 dozen per month. Therefore, we are saying that our existing stockpiles should be enough for several months. So, to sum up everything we've discussed, I really don't see any reason to panic, especially since American officials have specifically emphasized that this does not apply to air defense systems. The delay in the delivery of weapons and military equipment does not affect air defense systems.
All right. Well, we'll keep watching and waiting for news about Zelensky's talks with Trump. And in fact, all levels of diplomacy are currently involved, and there is pressure being put on the American arms lobby. Indeed, the coming weeks will probably give us more answers to all these questions. Let's move on to the successes of the armed forces of Ukraine and our special services. There have been more frequent strikes on temporarily occupied Crimea. Do you see a systematic approach in this? What is being destroyed first and foremost? For what purpose? And if it's possible to talk about this on air, with what means?
So let's define the following. What is our strategic objective in this war? The strategic objective in this war is the liberation of Crimea. I have insisted, I insist now, and I will continue to insist. Without the liberation of Crimea, it is absolutely impossible to talk about ending this war. In this regard, several subtasks are being addressed sequentially in the direction of Crimea, clearing out logistics, and securing an air corridor to increase our strike capabilities. That is why we see strikes on enemy targets that could counteract us, namely the destruction of radar stations, the destruction of launchers, strikes on aviation facilities, on aircraft located in Crimea, strikes on logistics, that is on bases and depots, which has already become systematic. We have constantly, without ever stopping, carried out strikes on Crimea. The intensity changes, the informational aspect changes, if you will, but the fact remains that we are constantly and steadily striking targets in Crimea with the absolutely clear goal of liberating the peninsula. And we will pursue this goal by all available means. Moreover, regarding Crimea, it is important to understand that it is necessary to destroy the logistics infrastructure located in northern Tavria. This is especially about the railway. And just recently, we were informed about the successful actions of our special services of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, specifically targeting railway facilities on the sections that are the only routes connecting Crimea with mainland Russia. Therefore, this is also an element of comprehensive effort to destroy facilities on the territory temporarily occupied by Ukraine.
The elimination of the commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Ildar Akhmerov, who was neutralized in Crimea, is already confirmed information. How painful is the loss of such a figure for the Russian Federation?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Or is it that a bloody seat is never left empty? They take out one commander and they quickly appoint another.
You know, I realize this may sound a bit strange. In fact, it doesn't really matter, except for the absolutely fair law of retribution and justice, generally speaking. Why? Well, tell me, can the Black Sea Fleet still be seriously considered a strike operational strategic formation? Frankly, not anymore. Therefore, accordingly, even the role of those who are pompously called the commander or the chief of staff of this formation is diminished. And here again, I want to emphasize that the value of this strike lies in the fact that retribution is inevitable and will be consistently applied to all traitors. And by the way, it's very telling that this happened in Crimea, that is on the territory of the very site that is our strategic objective. And such an elimination was demonstrative, and I think it should and will affect the moral and psychological state, what we used to call the political and moral condition of those traitors who are on the territory of Crimea. They cannot escape retribution. And you are absolutely right. In Russia, there are plenty of people eager to put on admirals or generals' epaulets, so the sacred place, or rather, the bloody place will not remain vacant. To rephrase the saying, there will be a replacement. I really hope that this is yet another enforcer condemned by us to just retribution, who deserves to be physically eliminated.
All right. We are striking not only in temporarily occupied Crimea. Explosions are increasingly being heard on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. One of the latest major targets was the energy plant in Yelets. There are several questions here at once. Will we be able to ramp up such attacks? Will we be able to repeat and continue them without US assistance if that does end up happening? Will European aid be enough? And also, are there already, from the strikes we've carried out so far, any irreparable losses for the occupiers' army, in your opinion?
I'll start from the end. There can't be any irreparable losses yet because, let's put it this way, the total amount of munitions being used doesn't allow us to say that we are delivering overwhelming strikes that completely take facilities out of the military-industrial supply chain. Next, can we ramp up? Yes, absolutely, we can ramp up. Why? Because these strikes are carried out exclusively with Ukrainian means of destruction. And here, America plays no role at all. Moreover, America does not provide us with the forces and means that would allow us to strike at such great depths. We are, in principle, limited to a maximum strike depth of about 200 kilometers if we're talking about ATAC mass. But no more than that, that's all. Therefore, any pauses, any interruptions in the supply of some kind of American weapons will not affect our determination to intensify these strikes. At the same time, it should be understood that we have and maintain cooperation with our European allies. And precisely this is the factor that allows us to say that the strikes will continue and that the intensity of the strikes will increase in the near future. Well, basically, that's exactly what we're doing. We have new developments. We are testing our new types of weapons on these targets. And I think that in addition to drones, our ballistic cruise missiles, which are now in the final stages of development and are being adopted into service, will also be added. It should be understood that there will not be many of these targets, these strike targets for now. We are limited in our ability to produce them. Therefore, the main focus will be on drones. And I repeat once again, in this situation, the increase or cessation of American aid will have no impact.
Well, then at least some European support would be desirable, like the Taurus missiles, for example, because we needed ballistic and strike drones as early as yesterday. Wouldn't you agree? And while we are waiting for at least serial, let alone mass production, the enemy is increasing its capabilities to shell Ukraine. What is their current situation with drone production as of today? Have the recent events in Iran had any impact at all on their drone program? Or is Budanov right when he says we shouldn't count on that the Russian Federation has already learned to produce enough drones on its own and is no longer dependent on supplies from Iran? And who could help us, so to speak, and with what exactly in destroying launchers, the same ballistic missiles, the launches of those same drones and so on? You know what I mean?
Let's put the Taurus issue to rest for today, because the Taurus missiles are launched from airborne platforms. That is, if we had at least received aircraft from Germany, which at least theoretically were designed to launch Taurus missiles, then we could talk about the necessity and possibility of using them. As of today, this is out of the question because the Taurus is a German weapon. And what we have are Belgian, Dutch and Danish F-16S, which are hardly suited for launching Taurus missiles. As for your question about destroying strike platforms or drone launchers, the answer has already been given. We need a cruise missile and a ballistic missile. The West can't help us with this because they don't have the kind of weapon that would allow us to strike at such great depths. And by the way, we've already demonstrated that we can destroy such targets using our own aviation capability. So what we're talking about here is how much we ourselves only we can build up such strike capabilities. Using drones against launchers is pointless and ineffective because by the time a drone reaches the area from which the Shaheeds or missiles were launched, those launchers will have already left the area. That's why I'm emphasizing Ukrainian-made weapons, greater range, and to be specific, it's missiles and cruise missiles that can really help us. As the old military saying goes, you need to kill the archers, not just try to dodge the arrows.
That's absolutely right. Well, then, let's hope for quick successes from the Ukrainian defense industry in the field of missile development. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your analysis with us. Serhiy Habsky, military expert, was our guest today on the YouTube channel Ukraine Today. Serhiy, thank you and see you next time.
See you next time. All the best.